I have a topic that's been bothering me for quite a number of years now, and I was just reminded of it with a recent article about Bruce Springsteen's upcoming concert tour. And that is, it's talking about how high prices and how I believe they're here to stay. This story you are probably familiar with. This is a few weeks old, so this is not a new story. But I wanted to include this in some other discussion. This was a story that made the Washington Post, and it said Bruce Springsteen's fans face $5,000 tickets and a crisis of faith. This is the first time fans really started to balk at this high-priced ticket thing that's been going on for quite a long time. 5, 6, 7 years at least. Very different than 20 years ago, even 15 years ago. And so I started looking into this a little bit, and this crisis of faith, that title, that headline caught my eye. And I wanted to see what this faith they were talking about. So the subheading was, Ticketmaster's dynamic pricing led to sticker shock, with many of the boss's most devoted fans wondering how he could support such a policy. This is by Allison Stewart, August 3, 2022. Very interesting article here, and talks about some of the people that are really ticked off about this. Here's one person. Susan Avery raised her daughter to believe that the boss was one rock star who could do no wrong. He doesn't tear up hotel rooms, points out Avery, a fan since the 70s, who has seen every Springsteen tour for decades. You don't see him on drug binges. He's really, really a solid, wonderful guy. Now, I think we as fans get into some trouble when we start to think that these people are wonderful people. We do not know these people. And what we are seeing is merely an image. And you may love their music and it may seem like they're nice people, but we really don't know. So I think what we're going to see here are people that really thought they knew him in a way that maybe he isn't. So let me explain dynamic pricing. So what this is essentially a way to try to remove the scalper from the equation, so that a website by an artist will have dynamic pricing. In other words, as the demand goes up, the price goes up too. And this is very common with hotels and airfare. And so why not concerts? And some people, in the case of Springsteen, were online on the website that was running his ticket sales. And they throw a ticket in the cart. And as they're poking around, maybe looking at other things, that ticket price goes up. And when they go to check out, it's higher than what it was when they put it in their cart. This is an issue for diehard fans who are on a budget, and most of us are on a budget. We don't have all kinds of money to spend on expensive concert tickets. I mean, I guess some people do, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. So on Springsteen's own Instagram and Facebook pages, people wrote stuff like this. So this is what a crisis of faith feels like. So this article goes on to talk about this crisis of faith and people using words like betrayed and got punched. And people saying things like, I would expect this stuff from the Eagles, but not from Bruce, things like that. Here's another thing, that Springsteen has always treated his fan base like family and has historically kept ticket prices low, only heightens the sense of indignation, says fan Amy Demma. Now this Amy Demma says she hasn't missed a Bruce tour since 1980, and she turned down a pair of not so great tickets in Boston that would have cost a staggering $18,000. Demma is going to 3 shows on the European leg of the tour. Flying to Dublin, staying for 3 concerts, and flying back is still cheaper than dynamic pricing stateside. Many fans are doing the same. So, well, Amy, I really feel sorry for you. You got to go all the way to Dublin, see 3 shows, and it's still cheaper. Wow, that's a shame. So these are the people complaining, if you can believe it. The fans are blaming promoters, and they're blaming, so John Landau is his manager, and they're suggesting that, well, Bruce has nothing to do with this, and we're just trying to keep the money out of the scalpers' hands. Why shouldn't this money go to the artist? All pretty good points. So Bruce, his only goal was to make sure, however much the tickets were sold for, that he got the money as opposed to scalpers. So this was admitted by management, and this was kind of backfired on them a bit. So I'd like to look at some other people's responses other than the people that were interviewed for this article here. And I turned to a YouTube channel. Now, this is a YouTuber I watch occasionally, and he did a video called Bruce Springsteen Ticket Prices. Does he have a moral responsibility to his fans? So Classic Album Review says this in his video. He suggests that many of us, including myself, he's a big Springsteen fan, hold Springsteen to a higher moral standard. This is a guy who carved out a career and audience singing about the marginalized and the dispossessed. I don't know why we should hold him to a higher standard than anybody else. I think that's a mistake. I think this gets into that worshipfulness of fandom that we see, and fans are easily let down when they put too much faith in these personalities. And that's what these people are. They're artists, yes, but they're personalities, really. So let's hear what some of the commenters say on his channel. We have a guy named here, Paul Cassidy. So with little to be earned compared with the past from recording music in the streaming era, artists are having to switch the revenue earning to live performances. So I think we have to expect that they will be relatively expensive. Whether that switch justifies £400 is another matter, but it's clearly what the market will bear. I'm just happy that I only have to pay £60 to see Nick Mason at the Albert Hall and Hackett later in this year. They give me truly great value for the money. Well, really, he's mistaking value for what the market will bear. He's kind of saying both things here. He said it's what the market will bear, but if £60 is what it costs to see Nick Mason, well, there's just not as much demand to see Nick Mason. Let's go to Rodney Havradin here. A couple years ago, Elton John played Australia on his farewell tour, I think the never-ending farewell tour. Prices were well over $1,200. I paid $500 for mine and felt awful for it. Love Elton, I've seen him live many times, but what made my jaw drop were those people in the most expensive seats were constantly getting up to get drinks, talking on their phones. In other words, the expensive seats near the front were sold to people who didn't want to hear the music, but rather just wanted to be seen at it. So I think that's an important point this Rodney makes here, is that music, this reminds me of sporting events. I'm a sports fan and have been for my whole life. And I've seen this happen at sporting events too. And I've seen people in the expensive seats posing for their selfies, for their social media. And generally, sports stadiums, at least in America, they are now being built for luxury boxes and for corporate sponsorship and for corporate entertaining. They're not really built for the fans, the dog faces like us. They're built for the big money. It's very common to see two very sizable rows of luxury boxes in every new stadium and every new ballpark. And as this has been going on for about 20 years in sports, and you could still buy a fairly affordable ticket, but the focus, the really nice seats, are reserved for the very wealthy. And you used to be able to get really expensive seats. Well, they used to not be in the 4 and 5 figures. I mean, you might have to pay. I mean, I'm dating myself here a bit. I mean, there was a time when you could get the best seats in the house for a normal game, not a playoff game, but for relatively affordable, under $30. Another guy here, Quantum Dave, suggests that Ticketmaster is equivalent to the mob, legalized graft. Springsteen should have a say, but apparently he doesn't give a crap. You know, I really don't think this is Springsteen's fault. You know whose fault it is? It's the people who buy the tickets. So long as somebody's willing to pay $5,000 for a ticket, that's going to be a benchmark of sorts for sales. It's what the market will bear. And I don't know that it's Springsteen's fault. I mean, if he could have charged $5,000 a ticket in 1980, he probably would have done it. But there was no demand for that. You couldn't charge that then. It's a different time now, and that's where I'm going here. You know, he's not the only one with these crazy ticket prices. I looked up a recent concert for Adele. Now, this is in Vegas at Caesar's Palace. Now, this is a 4,100 seat capacity arena or theater. So typically you're going to pay more. Those are much more exclusive. It's much more intimate. But the price I saw for Adele, okay, this was a front orchestra. This is not dead center. This is in section 103. These are $41,280 each. And this is for Saturday, the 19th, November 2022. So this is a couple months away. Now those seats, that's what they're asking. They may not go for $41,280, but that price had to get there somehow. People are paying that much. Now, obviously that's a very small theater. Very few people can see it. If she was doing a concert in a stadium, I don't know what those would command, but I would think it'd be similar to what Springsteen is getting. This past January, the Super Bowl, which is in, I think, Los Angeles. So a Super Bowl ticket, they were starting at $6,800. and they were reaching up to $81,000 for VIP seats. Now, listings were going up to $25,925 for a VIP section in Club 67 Hospitality. So I don't know where that is, and I don't care where it is, but that is a hell of a lot of money. Okay, this is an article as of Thursday. The most expensive VIP tickets found on StubHub for the Super Bowl was $147,000. Fees included for seats on the 50-yard line at SoFi Stadium. The cheapest pair of tickets were $6,395. That doesn't include the fees. Sporting events, concerts have been hijacked by the elite. That's what I'm getting at. And back in the day, I mean, the elite didn't care about sports. They didn't care about rock music. They were going to classical stuff. They were going to symphonies. They weren't going to Foghat. You know, they weren't going to any of that. What has changed? Same thing with the sporting events. $147,000 for a Super Bowl seat. Well, back in the 70s and 80s, I mean, the game just wasn't as big. It's grown into this huge thing, and it is the biggest event, sporting event, probably each year. So we are seeing this being only for elite prices, elite people that can afford huge prices. And I'm seeing this not just in sporting events and not just rock concerts, but this is filtering down to memorabilia. There was an article about a month back about a VHS tape of Back to the Future, still sealed, that sold for $75,000. Now, this is a format I never thought would have much value at all. And this particular tape was signed by one of the stars in the film. That was by Tom Wilson. He's the bad guy. He's the heavy that played Biff. It was his personal copy, and it had a little note with it, but $75,000. Now, I looked up the average autograph for Tom Wilson, and the average autograph is, they're only asking $250 to $450. So why would somebody pay $75,000 for that? I don't know. It's not like it's an original script signed by the whole. I mean, Michael J. Fox, I mean, he would be somebody, he'd be an autograph to get, the biggest star. But it's just signed by Tom Wilson. So how can that garner so much money? One of the reasons these Springsteen tickets are higher than normal has to do with the fact he's not announced a farewell tour. So what fans are thinking in their head, they're like, well, this might be the last chance we get to see him. And they're treating it like it's a potential last tour. So what fans are doing is they're purchasing tickets on spec. Speculation that this is a higher profile gig than maybe it otherwise would be, could be his last time around. And this reminds me of another thing that happened in the collectible world. And this was in sports cards. So those of you who collect baseball cards or things like this happened in the 80s as well, where you had a couple companies making cards, and then a few more companies were allowed to make cards. The monopoly was basically broken. By the late 80s, you had literally over 1 billion cards per year being produced. And the prices of all those cards through the 80s had been rising. And people were buying these things thinking they were going to put their kids through college. And this is not a joke. And I actually bought quite a lot. Not a lot, but I bought about 9 sets, $20 a set, and every year it would double. And then after about 5 years, I sold that stuff and went to Mexico. Some people weren't so lucky. All the stuff that they bought during that time, by the early 90s, it was all worthless. So this buying on spec for collectibles is a very tricky business. So what the industry did is, in baseball cards and cards across the board, they started making smaller sets, printing less quantities, and therefore there was a level of, not scarcity, but it wasn't overproduced. So that kept prices fairly high and kept the quantities low. So there was always a healthier demand for it. Now we see this scarcity model being introduced to a lot of things in the music industry. I saw this very big in the McCartney 3 album that was released a couple years ago. Let me show you some of the things that have been selling on eBay. For those of you who are fans of McCartney, know all about the McCartney 3, and there was several different editions of that album put out on vinyl. And there was cassettes, there were CDs, there was all kinds, but there's 11 different versions on vinyl that I'm aware of. There might have been more. But the one that right now has the biggest value is the Third Man Records version. It's called the 333 edition. So this is the highest bid, or the highest price is $1,695. And it ranges roughly from $1,300 to $1,700. Anybody could go there and buy that. Now those are not moving very quickly at that price, but I can tell you why they're that big, or why the price is that high, is because here's an auction. This was in January of 2021, where one of these albums sold for $2,880. For whatever reason, I don't know how many of those were made, probably not very many, but that is what I would call planned scarcity. And we see this with several of those McCartney 3 albums. So it gets marketed that there's only 3,000 or 5,000 of these existing. So people, the lucky people that get to them first, can get them for whatever the face value is, and then they start turning around and reselling them on the secondary market. As I've said earlier, you start buying all these multiple editions, that starts to move that artist's album up the charts. How long will this hold its value? I have no idea. When the baby boomers are gone, what's going to become of all these record collections? I think there's going to be a huge crash in the market. And a lot of the new stuff that we're paying exorbitant prices for, I see new vinyl on Record Store Day going for like $60, $70, $80. And I just think, just like the concerts, there's a select few that can afford this. So if there is to be a crash in the vinyl market at some time, I hope there's a crash in the concert ticket market, but I think that'll depend artist to artist. I just had as I was preparing for this, I was looking at some old ticket stubs I had. I pulled some out. And a buddy of mine, I was talking to him about this topic, and he sent me, this is Van Halen's Monsters of Rock. This is 1988. So the bands playing there, in addition to Van Halen, were the Scorpions, Dokken, Metallica, and Kingdom Come. And I'm just floored that on this ticket, it says that parking is included. And the ticket's only $27.50. Is there any place in any urban area that you can park for less than $27.50? That was included. Now this is 1988. It doesn't seem, yeah, that is long ago. Doesn't seem that long ago to me though. And just look what you got. This guy earlier talking about seeing Nick Mason for 60 pounds being good value for the money. I think this is good value for the money. Seeing 5 bands for $27.50, you know, Metallica, you know, Dokken, Van Halen, parking included, that's a good value to me. So I pulled out a few of these ticket stubs, and I've got others somewhere and I couldn't find them. But I tried to pull some that were a little bit more recent, meaning this century. So here's one, Jimmy Page with the Black Crowes. This is in 2000. And this was $26. And this ticket was, there were 4 sections in this amphitheater. It was about a 17,000 seat amphitheater. And I was in the 3rd section back, but I had center. And it was a good seat. And $26 to see Jimmy Page and the Black Crowes, not bad. At that point, I thought that was a pretty decent price even then. Here we have the Eagles, 2002, $58.50. This ticket, a friend of mine that I work with bought a pair of tickets and couldn't use them. I'm not a big Eagles fan. And at this point, this price was a big deal. And I bought these off her for 40 bucks a piece. And a buddy of mine likes the Eagles, so I said, why don't you go with me? So we went and saw the Eagles. It was boring. They play it exactly like the record. I might as well just put the album on. So anyway, but that's what you expect from the Eagles, to piss you off. But $58.50 in 2002, that's 20 years ago. Now what does an Eagles ticket cost? And you don't even have all the members there anymore. Yeah, okay, what else we got here? Got some sports ones, we'll get to those in a minute. Steely Dan with Michael McDonald. So this was 2006, this was $60.25. So this was in the 2nd row. And I bought these off of a scalp, this was a scalp ticket. And I think I paid 60 bucks for them on my way in. And the trick was in the day was to wait until right when the show starts, that's when those ticket prices drop. So I got 2nd row center for Steely Dan and Michael McDonald, which was a really good show. This one here is a Chicago show at Park West in Armitage. Love and the Zombies. This was 2004. This was $25. Smaller venue, you know, not a very high demand ticket, 2 60s bands, but very good show, and 25 bucks. So you sports fans out there, I'm sure, have seen huge and skyrocketing prices there too. So here's a couple of tickets I have. Lambeau Field, Green Bay. That's a ticket that's a much sought after ticket. The season ticket holders, that stadium has been sold out since the late 1950s. Tough ticket to get typically. This particular game was 2001, $46, Dolphins. This other one's a division rival versus the Vikings. Both of these are row 10, by the way. This is 2004, $50. So row 10 in section 132, that's kind of the corner of the end zone. Not a bad seat in that place. But 10th row, pretty good for $50. What those seats now are, I have no idea. Here's a NBA playoff game, 2000, $12. Now my buddy Doug and I went to this game, and I must confess, it was on the long end of the court, the very last row. So the worst possible seats you could get, but $12. And this is the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Indiana Pacers. And my buddy Doug and I, we still talk about this game. We had so much fun, and we were lucky to get those tickets. It was sold out, and we bought them at I don't know, about a day or so before, and there was barely anything left. So $12. Harlem Globetrotters. This is a $24 ticket. And where was this? This is a pretty good seats. This is a lower level ticket, and this is 2005. Here we have another Bucks game, Bucks Knicks 2009, $24. Okay, this is in the upper level, but center court. So that's a pretty darn good seat. So my point is that we're not going to see ticket prices like this, I don't know, maybe ever again. And it's really a shame because most of the fans, be it rock music or any kind of music, really, any place where you can go see people play, by and large are, lower middle class people that support these artists, and they're getting pushed further and further away from the live action. And this is going on all over the place. So, and the reason why is people can afford these high prices. And until they can't afford them, prices are going to stay high, I'm afraid. So anyway, that's my little rant on how prices are here to stay. Hopefully I'll have an update on this, though. I'll have some better news in the years to come. Thanks for watching.